This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham and Scott German, and we're going to talk some UVA basketball. And I think our listeners out there know that we don't talk a lot of UVA women's basketball, but there's an interesting topic out there with Joanne Boyle, the head women's basketball coach at UVA the past 7 seasons, announcing this week she's retiring, and the job's open. We kind of knew before the season will be open, and Scott, the talk is about Dawn Staley. Now, Staley's trying to play coy maybe, or whatever she's doing. She's acting like, she told media just yesterday, in fact, that she's not interested in the job. But once her season ends, I think that's when we have to start looking at that serious prospect of Dawn Staley maybe coming to Virginia. And we've been talking about this, Scott, in the media room with other folks back in the UVA media area at JPJ back during the men's season. This is not a surprise that, one, that Joanne Boyle is out as coach, and two, that Dawn Staley has emerged as a top candidate.
Yeah, we speculated, and some of the people that we talked to aren't just other media. They're media people that follow the UVA women's basketball very closely. So, I guess you could say we have inside information on that. But we speculated this was going to be last year. Not sure whether the resignation would come from that AD was discussed as a nice way out. Doesn't matter. That's really kind of irrelevant. Whatever. She's not going to coach here next year. And we speculated about Dawn, who that is UVA basketball. If you think about it, Dawn Staley, the Burgess, Tammy Reed. Those are the last real relevant connections to UVA basketball that the casual basketball observer can identify with. So, and I saw the comment that she made yesterday. Well, what was she going to make? Her team is still very much they're the defending national champion. I didn't expect her to say, "Oh, that's something I'm going to really have to consider once our team's season's over with." Dawn very well. Went to school with her. She's not probably the most diplomatic person. She's very competitive. I didn't expect her to say anything else. Yeah. And I don't buy anything into that. I think if UVA goes out and makes an effort, makes a serious effort, then I think Dawn Staley is going to be the next head basketball coach at UVA. I don't care what anybody says right now, because what else would she say at this point in time?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I had a discussion on Twitter with someone about that just yesterday. It was brought up, that Staley said what she said, and no question, yeah, she's got a team now that, like you said, Scott, they're the defending national champs. They're in the Sweet 16. She can't say anything but what she said yesterday. Now, a couple factors. One is that it has been talked about that she has a over $3 million buyout, but also we've been at least led to believe by those who would know, and I'll leave it as those who would know, that her contract does include an out from that buyout for one school and one school only, Virginia, which makes sense. It's her alma mater. She makes $1.45 million a year there. That's close to what some men's ACC coaches make. So that isn't a good amount of money. I think it's more than double from what I've been able to find what Joanne Boyle was making as the head coach at Virginia with the women's program. So Virginia would have to invest some money, obviously more money than they've been willing to invest. Now, the other factor, and I think, Scott, this is worth discussion too, and I'll throw my thoughts in and get your thoughts too. She made the point yesterday with reporters that she was upset about the way the last hiring went back in 2011 when Joanne Boyle was eventually hired. Craig Littlepage, the AD at the time at Virginia, reached out to Staley. She was then, I think, at Temple, and or maybe she had just taken over at South Carolina. It was one or the other, but she was still at Temple. So, and on her way to South Carolina, where she's now won a national championship, she expressed that she didn't like she didn't say that she didn't like that she didn't get the job, but she did say she didn't like the way the situation with Debbie Ryan was handled. Of course, Debbie Ryan was the coach who recruited her, coached her, mentored her as a a future young coach. And so I can understand that, but the situation's different now, and I'll leave that at that. I mean, Carla Williams is the new AD at Virginia. She's a former women's basketball player herself. She's got the experience in the SEC with her work at the University of Georgia as an assistant athletics director. So I would think that, Dawn's got to say that, yeah, she was upset at how things were handled 7 years ago, but, it's a different ballgame now with Carla Williams in place. And I would think that who knows? Maybe the reason Carla Williams is the AD is in part to try to lure Dawn Staley here because all the other jobs seem secure right now. So maybe this is the big hire that Carla can make, at least for the foreseeable future. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's target number 1, but also it's target number 1 through 10 that Dawn Staley, it's that important to Carla Williams that Dawn Staley is given every opportunity to take this job.
Well, I agree. I think what because Dawn was at Temple when the Debbie Ryan era ended at Virginia. From what I can read and have talked to those individuals that we know that are in the know, is that Dawn was more upset that she felt as though Debbie was George Welsh out of Charlottesville, and that really wasn't fired, certainly was not fired, but was really nudged out the door. And I did not have a problem. Again, pre-qualify this. I'm not the most knowledgeable women's basketball fan in Charlottesville, but by default, when you hang around the men's team as much as we do, you do overlap some with the media that does cover the media and the personnel that covers the team. So you do hear things, and we certainly want them to have their best interest. We want them to be successful. I thought Debbie was given plenty of time. Sure, her last 5 or 6 years in Charlottesville were not good seasons. So I don't have a problem with Debbie kind of being showed the door a little bit. But from what I understand, that was Dawn's biggest gripe. Not she didn't get the job, but in the way that maybe UVA handled Debbie Lee. But here's what I, in my post men's basketball era here of sulking, had plenty of time to think about other things. Here's another thing that the new AD Carla Williams can do, and we know if she were able to lure Dawn Staley from South Carolina, it's going to cost money. But the basketball program, the women's team is a non-revenue sport. But it doesn't have to be hemorrhaging money like they are now. And the only real way that the women's team can make money, not like men's, is that they're really depending upon the gate. And we did the math back in the winter. You take a 40 or 50% bump in attendance, and you pay Dawn Staley's salary. And there's no doubt that they could not bump the attendance 40, 50% if you put Dawn in there and you put winning programs in there. Heck, the number 1 player in the entire country is playing high school basketball 30 miles from Charlottesville. Yeah. It has not committed to a school yet. You could bring half of, if not the entire Madison County out every night if you were able to lure that girl from Madison County to UVA. But here's what I think would do a Carla hiring Dawn could do. And here's one of the things that I think it would do. It would not only turn but it would also set an egg timer beside the oven. Because football is the cash cow that supports the non-revenue sports. And you bring a coach in there like Dawn Staley, you make that financial commitment, you better have a plan for that football team to start drawing more than 35,000 to your stadium. So I kind of think it serves a dual purpose in that it also turns the heat up on Vince Hall a little bit. And we all happy with what she's seen so far out of the football program.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know if we've discussed this, and I think it's a good time to discuss it. Scott and I were at the Military Bowl, of course, back in late December. Cold day in Annapolis, very cold day in Annapolis, and we were on the 5th floor. That's where the media room was. No heat in there. The heat went off about an hour and a half before kickoff. And on the 6th floor above us were the two school parties. Navy and Virginia's groups were up above us in the luxury box on the 6th floor. And we've been told, again, on good authority by someone who would know, and so we're not passing rumors, we're passing truth here. That's not just been very publicly talked about. That as Virginia trailed 35-7 at halftime, 42-7 early third quarter, Carla Williams really in what felt like her first official act as the new athletics director at UVA started writing a really long email that was going to be sent to Bronco Mendenhall. Basically, the gist of that email, we were told, again, briefed by someone with the knowledge that would be as accurate as possible. Essentially, good job. You got us to a bowl game. You got 6 wins. You inherited a bad situation, and you're making it better. But these kind of efforts, this 49-7 loss to Navy, not acceptable. And you're on notice. Your free pass is over. I didn't hire you, and you got to go win some football games, and no more performances like this. So, Carla Williams is the first African American woman AD in the ACC, and she's a hard ass. And of course, so is Dawn Staley. Their personalities will match up real well. But Scott, to your point about Bronco Mendenhall, I mean, you bring in Dawn Staley. You've got if you have Dawn Staley as your women's coach at UVA, you've got a coach that's a national championship coach. You've got Brian O'Connor in baseball, national championship coach. You've got Tony Bennett, 3-time national coach of the year, I think about to be the 4th-time national coach of the year. Bronco Mendenhall is the weak link among those coaches. Of course, you got men's tennis, you got lacrosse. I mean, you've got all those other sports that win regularly, soccer. But Bronco Mendenhall suddenly becomes a weak link, and the measurements that are out there, the measuring sticks that are out there, just get even higher when you bring a Dawn Staley in. And boy, the pairing. When you talk about then just looking at basketball, from a men's and women's perspective, who would have a better tandem of coaches in America than Virginia's tandem? If Dawn Staley comes to Virginia, then Dawn Staley and Tony Bennett. I don't think anybody in America comes even close, much less approaches the level UVA would have if Staley is somehow lured to Charlottesville.
I agree. And, going back to the Military Bowl, I don't like to think about that, but how factual, how actual, what we were informed of about Ms. Williams being disappointed. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out she couldn't have been very happy with what went on in that football game. I mean, that was a total preparedness, whatever you want to say, and kind of washed all the good taste of Steve out your mouth real quick. And so it doesn't. You don't have to be real savvy to know she couldn't have been very pleased with what went on at that football game. So, having said that, the football program was not making nearly the money that they could make. When you have 30-some thousand empty seats at Scott Stadium, you're going to bowl games that cost you money. That Military Bowl costs you, they make money on that. You're missing out on potential concessions. It just goes on and on and on. So the football program is a cash cow, and you're not going to sit back and let it hemorrhage like it's doing very long. So, you put someone like Dawn Staley in the basketball and the women's program, a legend at UVA, I just think it served a dual purpose in that it kind of sends a signal. Hey, we're in this for keeps, and we're gonna hire the best, and all of a sudden, there's a little bit more pressure on the football team to start turning things around. You just talked about Dawn Staley. marketing as far as season tickets, both men's and women. I think what happens to women is you do tend to draw a little more local crowd because some of the games might be difficult for people for both teams because they're playing different nights. We see what the local community, how they support the baseball program. There's absolutely no reason in my mind they couldn't fill that lower bowl up on a regular basis in basketball, and you do that and you pay for a salary.
Well, I'll tell you this too. I mean, Scott, you alluded to how I was a student at UVA back in the Staley years. I've talked probably on these podcasts before about how I used to work my way in as I could into pickup games with the women's team, members of the women's team and the men's team. Off season, they would play pickup games in the various rec centers on grounds at UVA, and I'd hang around on one of the side courts and eventually just kind of worm my way into the pickup games. And Staley would play with the men, and it was her court. I mean, she ruled the court. But back in that era, I mean, you mentioned the Burge twins and Tammy Reese, and there was a Dina Evans was a point guard who played. She was an Olympic team member as well. I mean, and Dawn Staley, let's not overlook this. We talk a lot about Ralph Sampson and his impact on the men's game. He was a 3-time National Player of the Year. She was a 3-time National Player of the Year. And perhaps if she's not the most decorated women's basketball player in U.S. basketball history, she's on the short list of the top 2 or 3. Maybe Lisa Leslie, maybe Cheryl Swopes. They're at least in the same ballpark. But Staley, I mean, boy, she was the point guard on those Olympic teams in 96 and 2000 and 2004 Olympic teams. And she's had the great career as a coach. First at Temple, now at South Carolina, win the national championship at USC. But back in those days, back in the 90s, what stands out to me was, I was a basketball junkie then, just like I am now. So when I was a student, one thing you had access to was free tickets to games. The women's games were harder to get tickets to than the men's games, and the men's team back then was good. They won the NIT one year and were in the NCAA tournament the other 3 years I was a student there. But the women's team was a Final Four team 2 of those 4 years. They were number 1 in the country for the better part of 2+ seasons. And I remember a game. Now, again, the student tickets were free, but you had to get there early to get good seats. One game I didn't get there early for was when number 1 Virginia played number 2 Maryland. I sat on the top row of U-Haul in a sold-out U-Haul, and that wasn't the only time that I sat in a sold-out U-Haul for a women's game. U-Haul had a capacity of about 8,900. JPJ's got a capacity of around 15,000. It doesn't to me go out of the realm of possibility that if, assuming Dawn Staley does the kind of job she can do at Virginia that she's done at Temple and out in South Carolina, that, with the ACC competition being what it is, that Virginia can get some sellouts during the season at home and certainly, get, over 10,000 fans a game there. I mean, I know this. When Scott and I, before we jumped on here for this podcast, we were talking about Dawn Staley, and I said, we haven't covered women for a while. I'm there first game in November next year if Dawn Staley's a coach. I don't care if they're playing whoever they're playing. Dawn Staley gets me to double my schedule next year in terms of going to basketball games. We've got all the men's games. We'll do all the women's games. That's what Dawn Staley does. Even without winning a game, she's Dawn Staley. And even if next year's team – now this year's team, of course, went to the second round, lost to Dawn Staley's current team in South Carolina. But presumably, you get someone with her skill as a coach. They'll at least do the same thing, if not be a little better next year. But wait till she starts recruiting and getting her players and her system installed. Yeah, the sky's got to be the limit for this if we can get, big if, but if we can get Dawn Staley, I mean, maybe we can approach those heights, Scott, that we had back in the 90s when it was an expectation that this team was knocking on the door for a national championship. Never did get that win in a national championship game. But I think she can get them back to that level.
No, I think she can too, and I'll say this, and I'll let you tell a story. I don't know what kind of X's and O's Coach Dawn Staley is. I think she's probably a very good coach, sideline coach. But from what I have read, she is a relentless, competitive recruiter. Now, having said that, tell our listeners, tell them a story about the pickup game that you played with Dawn Staley, and I believe you said Dawn Staley was playing against Brian Stiff.
That's the game that I remember. I'll never forget the moment. Somehow worked my way into a game. Brian Stiff and Anthony Oliver, longtime UVA fans will remember AO from back in the day too, the shooting guard on those teams. And so Stiff and AO were on one team, and Staley, one of the Birds twins, and you could never tell which one. They were identical twins, and they all wore the same clothes when they came, and so they could just sub in and out for each other, and you just never knew. But it was a very competitive game, obviously, when you have those kind of people. It was right before final exams my first year. That would have been 1991. And so one sequence in the game, Brian Stiff on a fast break. It was a 3-on-1 fast break, and Stiff went up for a dunk over top of Staley, and actually threw it down. I mean, this is Brian Stiff in a pickup game. It was some good balling. And Staley took a charge. Now, anybody out there who plays pickup basketball knows you don't take charges in a pickup game, and you certainly don't call them if you take them. Dawn Staley gets up and says that was a charge, and the thing was she wasn't authoritative about it in the sense that she was cursing and throwing a fit. She just stood up, said that was a charge, and everybody said, okay, that's a charge. And, we didn't count the point. You played 11 by 1s in a pickup game, and at least you did there at Slaughter Rec Center back in the day. So Brian Stiff, future NBA player, played in the NBA for a long time, threw one down, and Staley says, charge, no basket. And, we just all said, you know what? Dawn Staley's right. That's a charge, and we're not going to count that basket. That's the gravitas that Dawn Staley has. That was her court. I mean, now again, Brian Stiff, NBA player. There were men's and women's college players all over that floor. That was her court. That was her gym that day. And that's what she does. That's how she wins championships. That's how she won Olympic gold medals. It's her gym. We're just playing in it with her.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. And again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm the most knowledgeable women's basketball expert, or even men's for that matter. But I don't think there is anyone else in the country, any other name, unless it's the Connecticut coach, whom there has been some scuttle about maybe he needs another challenge. I'm not sure. He did coach at Virginia. Gino. I can never pronounce his name. Ariana. Unless it's Gino, there is not one single name in the country dramatically create that extra generate that revenue, create an increased gate. Now, I'm not saying that there's no one in the country that can't make Virginia a winner. Those are two different things, but because I'm sure there are. But you bring Dawn Staley to Virginia, and the fans will come before she wins, guaranteed.
Yes.
And that's what you need because this is a little different than baseball. Baseball is a non-revenue sport as well as basketball. But these girls, they're giving out exactly the same amount of scholarships for women's basketball that the men's basketball team's giving out. Is that correct?
I think the women actually get more. I think they get 2 more scholarships than the men get, actually, for Title IX purposes.
So it's costing the university a lot of money to have those empty seats.
Yeah.
So you bring a Dawn Staley there, and those fans will be there before the winning starts. Anyone else other than the Connecticut coach is going to have to put a winner on the floor, and a consistent winner, maybe a couple years of consistently winning before you're going to bring that fan base up. But you bring Dawn Staley in, and I think the women average, from what I've been told, and you can't take the box scores because empty seats somebody may have bought a ticket. They got counted as in the attendance, but that empty seat didn't buy a hot dog, didn't buy popcorn. I think the women average somewhere roughly around 2,000 fans a game. And you put Dawn Staley on the sideline, and that's going to be at least minimum. Your thought on this? I say at minimum you double that to 4, maybe even more on average. So anyone else in the country is going to have to win first for a couple of years before you get the fan base back. You hired Dawn Staley, and that fan base is back from the first game of the season on.
Oh, I wonder if the first game, if Dawn Staley is the coach, and there's a November game against North Carolina A&T, if there's not 10,000 people in there, and even more closer to a sellout, I'd be surprised just because of the novelty. Because the women's fans too. You said it, Scott, earlier that women's basketball fans. I mean, they're not as many of them right now who are UVA women's fans. That is, but they're hardcore. And they've been with that program for a long time. The ones who are still there, they're the ones who remember the 90s because a lot of them were there as fans in the 90s. And I just think that we talk about women's basketball being a non-revenue sport, baseball being a non-revenue sport. What's funny about baseball at UVA, I mean, with the $18 million renovation to Davenport Field, now Disherman Park at Davenport Field, baseball at UVA, it's not football, but it makes money. It may not be a revenue cash cow that can fund other sports, but it more than pays for itself. And if women's basketball can get in that same realm, that's just another feather in the cap and for the program overall. And we talked about this, Scott. You and I talked about this back when Craig Littlepage first announced that he was going to be stepping down as AD. I guess we're talking back last September during the football season. And we said, okay, yeah, Mendenhall's in year 2. It's going to be hard to replace him anytime soon. To be fair, you got to give a coach 5 years, his 5 years to flesh things out. Obviously, baseball's in a good spot. Men's basketball's in a good spot. The Olympic programs, there's a lot of good stuff going on there. So, usually a new athletics director comes in, and the first thing they want to do, we saw this down at Virginia Tech. Since Whit Babcock took over Virginia Tech, they've replaced the football coach, the basketball coach. They've replaced the baseball coach, the women's basketball coach. So Babcock came in and basically cleaned house. I mean, you didn't technically fire Beamer, but nudged him out the door and got rid of, the dead weight in other sports. And so at Virginia, when Carla Williams gets the job, we look at it and say all those other sports are in good shape. It's women's basketball that needs the attention. You have to wonder now, the fact that Joanne Boyle quote unquote retires, since we'd been hearing for months leading up to that announcement that this was going to be her last season, no matter what, even if she got an NCAA bid, which she did, even if she wins the NCAA tournament game, which she did, if the hire of Carla Williams wasn't entirely focused by the powers that be at UVA to say, okay, we don't need a new men's basketball coach, we're not going to need a football coach for at least 2 or 3 more years. This new AD is going to be hired to make sure we get women's basketball right. You got Carla Williams again, who's got the experience in the SEC as an assistant athletics director at Georgia. The SEC, that's where South Carolina is. That's they won the national championship from Georgia. Mississippi State's program, the team that actually knocked off UConn last year in the women's tournament, that's an SEC program. SEC women's basketball is top notch. And in general, the SEC doesn't take losing as a sitting down kind of proposition. So I wonder if this is not why Carla Williams is here, is to make that full court press. The best case Virginia can make is a former women's basketball player with SEC experience to try to lure Dawn Staley here, and that program can and will make money and can and will win games if all this comes to fruition.
Well, and I following that line of thought, I agree with you. Did she come in and her intent was not to really make any initial ruffles or so to speak in the water, then I would have said that Coach Boyle would have probably, the team went to the NCAA tournament this year. They got an NCAA bid. They had a really good conference record. They won an NCAA game. They really were competitive against South Carolina against the defending national champions. That was a game going into their final to the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Competitive in that game. If Carla Williams is brought here to just kind of oversee things, then I think a reasonable person would say, well, the basketball team, overall was trending up this year. Let's give her another year. But whether or not she, quote, retired, unquote, or whether she was given that option to retire, for whatever reason, she's not coming back next year. And I tend to think that there was a little more to it than just retiring. I think that was just a very nice option that UVA gave her, and that Carla Williams plans on making a big splash because, like I said, you bring anyone else in here other than the Connecticut coach, and it's not a big splash. It's not going to really create a lot of interest. You're not going to stand any chance of getting the high school player of the year from Madison. Not quite sure of her name, but she's Gatorade. She was just awarded the Gatorade Player of the Year, State of Virginia. From what I understand, she's top 5 national player of the year. That has expressed no interest in Virginia to this point. So, I just think that there's a little more going on behind the scenes, and just because Dawn Staley said she wasn't interested in the job doesn't mean she's not interested in the job.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would kind of jump on that too to talk about, since we've been hearing, Scott, and telling our listeners out there, I mean, we've been hearing these reports for months that things were going to go in this direction. It's not a surprise that she's gone. You don't force your current coach, who's only 54 years old, who took you to the second round of the tournament. You don't force her out quietly and give her the face-saving way of doing so by letting her call it a retirement, if that's what happened, and it seems like very clearly that's what happened. If you don't have something lined up, and if you don't have something lined up, and because honestly, if you end up pushing Joanne Boyle out the door, and then you don't get Dawn Staley, and you end up with another person who's going to try to prove themselves by coming to UVA and building a new program and that kind of thing. I mean, you've taken a step back, and from a program that finally got things moving in the right direction. Samantha Brunel is her name. For the recruit we're talking about, Samantha Brunel, and she's William Monroe High School, and and she's the person that everybody wants. She had expressed some interest to some degree with UVA, but when the thing is, when UConn comes calling in women's, it's like UCLA back in the 60s and 70s. How did UCLA with John Wooden, when they had Alcindor and then they had Bill Walton and they had all those other players around those guys? I mean, where women's basketball is right now, if UConn wants you go to UConn. But that's where having a high profile coach like a Staley can actually lure. That could be a 2-for-1 deal kind of thing. But yeah, if you push Joanne Boyle out the door, and then you don't get the high profile coach like a Staley to replace her, and you start over with another new person. Yeah, you've not only lost the momentum you've built with Boyle finally getting into a tournament, finally winning a game in the tournament, but yeah, you take a step back, and I don't see that being the case. I mean, UVA does things a lot smarter than that. They don't take the low road, so to speak. So I'd be surprised. I mean, if Staley turns him down, I would think that we might find out later that it was that there may have been some sort of a wink, nod agreement in principle that she just backs out of, and you see that happen. I mean, there was a story that David Teal wrote last week about Tony Bennett, and Bennett almost picked up the phone and called Virginia and said, "I'm not taking the job." 9 years ago. So those kind of things do happen. We have Rick Barnes was the next future coach of UVA, decided not to go to UVA. Pete Gillen, before he took the job, actually turned down the UVA job after taking it at 1.2. So those kind of things do happen. But I mean, to me, all signs point.
Because Tony had no connection with UVA. Neither did Rick Barnes, but we know Don's connections. And if there's a gentleman's agreement, a ladies' agreement, whatever, then if Virginia wants her and she wants Virginia, it's going to happen. I don't think anyone's going to turn. I don't think anyone's going to persuade Don not to take that job. The other thing, you're right. You don't fire or gently nudge her out the door, Coach Boyle, because the team took a step in the right direction. You know, whether it was a giant step, baby step, it was not a step back. You get her out, and you don't make that hire, that big profile hire, then you bring in an up-and-coming assistant at a mid-major school or a head coach at a mid-major school, and your program is taking a step back. And I don't think Carla Williams is there for that reason. I think she got too much clout to have to settle for that, if you will. And the other thing is what we heard. There's no reason for me to believe it's not true. That Dawn had a pretty steep buyout at South Carolina, but she had one exemption, and that one exemption was UVA. So, things are adding up, and it may not lead to a Dawn Staley hire, but my point is, whatever she commented about yesterday, whatever her comment was, that doesn't mean one iota. That's what she was supposed to say.
Now, here's one thing, Scott, that I can't believe it's taken us this long to talk about, but it occurred to me as you were talking. I don't know why it just now occurred to me. I was thinking back to when UNC, after Dean Smith left UNC, stepped down, and Bill Guthridge took over for a couple years, took 2 teams to the Final Four, and he retired because he was getting close to retirement age himself. And then UNC, after Guthridge stepped down, they tried to lure Roy Williams from Kansas. Couldn't do it at that time. Matt Doherty gets the job, runs the program into the ground. Unfortunately, we love Matt. We see him at UVA games all the time. He's a scout, and he works UVA games an awful lot. But the program did take a major few steps back at the end of his senior year. Lost 20 games one season under Matt Doherty, his last season there. And so the second chance that UNC got to try to lure Roy Williams back, Dean Smith himself gets on the phone and says, Roy, we need you. The Carolina family needs you. And Roy tearfully leaves Kansas, a place that, obviously Carolina was in his heart. He was a student there. That's where he was a student assistant. He was a grad assistant. That was his home. He's from Carolina. But he had built Kansas's program back from the dead after Larry Brown had run it to the ground himself with the NCAA violations, everything else. Roy had Kansas a national contender on a yearly basis and had to be pried away from Kansas. And the only thing that pried him away from Kansas was Dean Smith. So, in that context, Debbie Ryan, what kind of role can she play in this? Obviously she was Dawn's recruiter, she was Dawn's coach, she's Dawn's mentor, and if Dawn's saying that the reason she's upset, she's at least saying publicly that she wouldn't want to take the job is because of how UVA treated Debbie. Well, there's one way to rectify that, right? I guess. How that plays out. I don't know what kind of relationship that Carla Williams may have or may not have with Debbie Ryan, but it would seem like she'd be an important recruiter in this process.
From what I gather, initially Debbie was a little, had some bad feelings about it. I don't think she went, begrudgingly, but from what I've been told through our sources, is that those fences have been meant, and that Debbie is a regular at UVA women's basketball games. And so hopefully Carla Williams, if she needs to reach out to Debbie, will. But Carla Williams, we don't want to underestimate her, because I think she's a very fluent professional, and I believe if there are fences that need to be manned, they're going to have to be manned sometime, regardless of whether we get Dawn Staley or not. And I believe she's probably the one individual that's capable of bridging that gap, mending those fences. So, but getting back to Dawn or Debbie, I think those things have been mended. She's pretty much back in good graces with the program, or if there was some bitter feelings, she's over it now, and we'll just see. We'll have to wait and see. Just I hope it happens because I'd like to go back to some women's games again.
So, like at the end of PTI, they do corrections, and I got to do a correction here. Staley, 2-time National Player of the Year. I said 3 times, but I also underestimated Final Fours. I said 2 Final Fours, 3 Final Fours with Staley there, including a championship game loss in overtime in 1991. They lost to Tennessee 70-67, but of course, one of her previous team beat Tennessee, won Tennessee's home floor. I think that was in the Sweet 16 that year too. To ruin that Tennessee team's run back when those games, when Virginia and Tennessee, this is before UConn was a factor in women's basketball. It was the big battles back then were Virginia, Tennessee, and Dawn was an important part of those. And yeah, I only bring up Debbie's name. I mean, yeah, she's someone who.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say if I'm out recruiting, if I'm Carla Williams. Hopefully, yeah, I can. There are a lot of things I can lean on. I mean, the facilities, the hometown aspect. I mean, I know she's a Philadelphia girl, but Dawn, played college basketball at Virginia. That's her home from a college standpoint. Launched her career from there, that kind of thing. But yeah, if you want to give me everything at my arsenal, Debbie Ryan sitting in that living room with me, if I'm Carla Williams, wouldn't be a bad thing to have along with me as far as recruiting. But man, just the fact that we're talking about this, Scott, yeah, I don't know. I think, and I'm rooting for South Carolina to go as far as they can go, win another championship, as far as that goes. But if I'm a betting man, if I was putting money on this, I'd put money on the next coach at UVA being Dawn Staley. Maybe I'm Pollyanna-ish about this too, but I really think that if they go down, they're going to go down swinging, and make every effort to make that possible.
I agree, 100%. My point was whether she won two national player of the year, or 3. If there's a non-gender Mount Rushmore of Virginia basketball, then Dawn Staley is up there with Ralph Sampson.
Yeah.
Nothing else. No other argument can be made. It would be Ralph, Dawn Staley. You can name your other 2 or 3 or whatever, but those are your first 2 that you chisel out up there is Dawn Staley and Ralph Sampson.
Yeah, that's right. So, boy, we have done a good job here, Scott. We're just about to the end of our podcast, and we've talked women's basketball the whole time. We haven't talked about anything lingering from something else that may have happened. I'm not even going to reference it, just to say that we haven't talked about anything else basketball-wise as far as Virginia goes, and I'm not going to let us talk about any of those other things. I will say I haven't slept a full night since last week. It's odd how that is, but it's baseball season now, and it's women's basketball coaching hire season now, and we've done a good job talking about those important things and not talking about anything else as far as UVA sports goes.
Yep, and there's still a little more to talk about. Maybe we can talk about that later on. This thing is big a deal as a lot of people think. A lot of people here they act like it's the first domino has fallen. I mean, come on, really? He's just the guy who's been there for 9 years. That's what assistant coaches do.
Oh yeah, since we broached the topic, yes, Ron Sanchez. Yeah, when we text each other, we talked about how we will talk about Sanchez, and we should talk about Ron Sanchez quickly. I think it's great news for Sanchez. Obviously, I mean, for the guy, he was a Tony's assistant here at Virginia for 9 years, top assistant for 9 years. He was a top assistant at Washington State for 3 years. He's a guy that when Tony was being recruited to come to Virginia and walked around grounds, he called Sanchez and discussed things. From across the country, basically, to talk about the job and what it could mean for them if they moved here together and that kind of thing. Eventually, when you're Ron Sanchez and you're the top assistant for someone like Tony Bennett, it's logical that you want to look and strike out on your own and have a chance to do something on your own. And UNCC has been a good job in the past for other coaches, so good for him, and also maybe a chance for Tony to build his staff even more. Brad Soderberg probably moves up to the role of that top assistant if he wasn't already. I mean, Tony has one thing that Virginia men's basketball has had for a number of years is so much stability in the coaching staff. Certainly Richie McKay left a couple of years ago to go back to Liberty after I think he was at Virginia for Tony's first 6 years. But he went back to Liberty after leaving Liberty's head coaching job to come to Virginia for that period of time. Tony was able to bring Brad Soderberg on, a guy that was a fellow assistant with him on Dick Bennett's staff at Wisconsin back, the late 1990s and early 2000s. Took over as the interim and then as eventually the head coach there at Wisconsin after Dick stepped down mid-season that year. But maybe this is a chance for Virginia, for Tony to find someone new to bring in. I mean, I talked about this. I wrote a column about this, Scott, this week. I don't know if you got to see the column or not, but all the talk about what Virginia needs to do. Here's what they don't need to do. One, don't listen to Pat Forty. Pat Forty can go to hell. There's so many smart people writing about this program. David Teal and me, and I know it seems like everybody with an opinion has been writing about Tony Bennett, but you're not going to change the pack line defense. You're not going to change the mover blocker offense. Maybe you do bring somebody in who can do some things offensively a little more creatively. And maybe that's a chance. Maybe this opening with Sanchez leaving to take a head coaching job gives Tony a chance to maybe inject something new into the staff. Maybe he does go for somebody who's got some fresh ideas in terms of offense that can generate some more offense, because you don't change what you do pace-wise, you don't change what you do defensively, but maybe just a little tweak here and there offensively, and that's what Virginia needs to get over the top. And because we're so close, we're very close, we just need something to help us, push through those tough moments. We saw it this year twice: the loss of Virginia Tech, the loss of UMBC. The offense stagnated, and the team lost those games. If you can have something that can give you something else to go to, maybe a new coach could do that. So I look at this as a positive thing. It's always a growth thing, and it's good for Sanchez. It may be good for Tony Bennett down the line as well.
Yeah, I mean, we lost. McKay was the associate head coach, I believe, when he left to go back to Liberty. And things worked out pretty well for UVA after he left. Maybe they were too much alike. All the assistants, they were all Tony-like clones. And bringing someone new in is a chance to get some new ideas, to get some new thoughts. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. That's what assistant coaches do. They're very, any program, any top program, you're going to lose assistant coaches. To think that you kept Williford and Sanchez for 9 years since he's been there, that's amazing. There's some programs, even here in the Valley, that have lost out on some good potential coaches by not reaching out to them. So I don't see this as being a bad thing at all. I like it. I'm glad that Coach Sanchez that's a good job. UNC Charlotte, big school, good. They can recruit well there, play in a decent conference. That's a great stepping stone for him. So I don't see it as being the first domino has fallen. You got to be kidding me. There's anybody that thinks that, then they're delusional.
Yeah, the what UVA's got coming back, and unlike last year, you don't hear any rumblings. We've been hearing rumblings late last season that maybe there'd be some players maybe shuffling out. We didn't have identities of players, and certainly, Darius Thompson, Mario Shayok both leaving. The names themselves were a jolt. Jared Royer was not a surprise from a talent standpoint. Good kid, talented kid, but maybe not ACC talented kid. But from this year's team, you got a lot of important guys coming back, guys who can grow into some new roles. This team, on paper, will be a top 5, top 10 team preseason next year. Expectations through the roof. And it'll be hard to repeat 31-2, but that's why I say maybe some new life, just a little bit of different thought can be a good thing. And here's the thing about Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett's going to win He's already won championships at Virginia. He's won ACC regular season championships, 2 ACC tournament championships. He's going to add Final Four banners. He's going to add national championship banners. It's going to happen. He's been at Virginia 9 years. I mean, we talked about this. Jim Boeheim didn't make his first Final Four for 11 years. He didn't make his second Final Four until his 20th year. Dean Smith didn't win a championship until his 22nd year. John Wooden didn't make a Final Four until his 16th season, back when the Final Four was you only had to win 1 or 2 games to get there. He didn't get to a Final Four until his 16th season, back in a much smaller tournament era. So Tony's going to win. His system is going to win. Maybe just a tweak or two here or there, not a wholesale change, just some just some little improvements on a couple of different things, and this program is going to win championships. And so, it's going to be fun, and I think it'll be even better. And congratulations to Coach Sanchez, because that's a great opportunity for him, and I think it'll be a great opportunity for Tony Bennett to flesh out his staff with maybe some new thinking. And these are all good to me. We're not even talking about a lot here. We're talking about some good news for both sides, both for Coach Bennett and for Coach Sanchez.
Yes, and for anyone read conspiracy theories that thought that this was something that happened because of the loss to UNBC. Really, do you think that UNC Charlotte, that deal went down that quick? Between Friday night and I think he was announced as the head coach when Monday or Tuesday?
Monday, right? Monday, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, those agents have been discussing that for quite some time. That wasn't something that happened because we lost the first round tournament.
The timing is what it was. I mean, the timing could have been the first Tuesday or Wednesday in April as well if Virginia had gone that far. So that is what it is. And the naysayers, understandably, they're having their day right now with UVA basketball. But I am sitting here, Scott, at a podcast table with I've still got the microphones are on an ACC tournament media guide. I've got confetti from the floor at Barclays Center. 31 wins, 31-3 record this year. I'll still take it. This was a great season for UVA basketball. It didn't end the way we thought it would or thought it should, but it's a great season for UVA basketball. Next year, let's go out and win some more games in March. But I don't think anything can take away from what a great season this was. Even that dispiriting loss. This was a memorable season, and we'll talk about it for a long time afterwards. And what this does is it gives a young team. There's a lot of guys coming back next year. The important guys on this team are coming back next year. Gives them even more motivation. So it'll make them work just that much harder to win some more games next year. But this was a fun season, and we can't overlook that.
Yeah, historical season, and I think the other thing too that for us to get caught up in the record, we've been prepared that it's not all. I mean, we may not be 17-1 in the ACC next year. We may not go perfect on the road. We learned with the baseball team that not always does your best team, does your team with the best record go further. The baseball team, we talked about O'Connor's national championship team, that maybe his third best team at UVA. So if we have some bumps in the road next year and we're not sitting there perfect on the road in the ACC, there's no reason to get down, because it's how you playing at the end of the season, how you play in the tournament, and so that's what I'm going to be thinking about, because it's going to be hard to expect us to go 31-2 again.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. I mean, because I think on paper next year's team is going to be better across the board. I mean, and no offense at all, Devin Hall is going to be an NBA player. I think he's going to work his way through the summer league into a situation next year where he's getting paid to play basketball in the NBA, maybe the G League to start with, kind of like Leonard Parentis, but he's going to be playing for an NBA franchise, whether it's G League or NBA, somewhere next year. But I think DeAndre Hunter starts for him in the backcourt. Love Isaiah Wilkins, Defensive Player of the Year in the ACC this year. But either you have Mamadi Diakite or Jay Huff starting for him in the front court. The other of those two is the backup in the front court. You'll have two guys who are a year older, and Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome, who had breakout seasons this year. They're only going to be better next year. You're going to have Marco Anthony, Francisco Baldacci, in the backcourt as backups. I mean, next year's team is going to be, if you can believe it, it's going to be more talented than this year's team, and it's going to be a year older, a year more experienced. All these guys, except for Huff, Huff and Baldacci, have had playing time, and Huff and Baldacci have pedigrees that tell us they will be able to play important roles next year. So, yeah, on paper, this team should be more talented, certainly more offensively talented than this year's team. But, yeah, 31-2, I don't know. I said this, Scott, and we talked about this on our drive back from Charlotte. We talked about this a lot this season. I honestly think, and it's not just because I'm a UVA guy, I think this was the best ACC team that I've ever seen. Now, there have been ACC teams, obviously, several Duke teams, some Carolina teams, a Maryland team back when they were in the ACC that won national championships. But from an ACC standpoint, games in the ACC, this was the best ACC team I've ever seen. 20 wins, 1 loss. The 1 loss was in overtime. Virginia had shots at the end of regulation and overtime to win that game. They were that close to being perfect. We'll never see a better ACC team than this Virginia team this year. It didn't end the way it was supposed to, but next year's team, I think, builds on this. And hopefully this time next year, Scott, I'm trying to think. I looked at this already. The Final Four next year is in Minneapolis. I think that the regionals next year, I don't think it's New York in 2 years. But it's hopefully we're in some big city on the Thursday next year, Scott. We better be, damn it. Getting ready for a Sweet 16 game. That's right. So yeah, I mean, so again, good. Congratulations to Ron Sanchez. Good luck to Carla Williams. Our hearts are with you. Whatever we need to do to help you, let us know. The Dawn Staley launch has already started. So I think that can wrap us up for the week here on our podcast. I want to thank Scott German for his time. We talked an hour of UVA basketball, and somehow we all got through it. Thank you for listening, and signing off, this is Chris Graham. Wahoo Wah.